as you saw, I got ahead of myself there and I put the glue on this. I've already cleaned the glue off of the neck. I've set the fretboard back on here, and now I'm going to very carefully score along both sides with this sharp X-Acto knife. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can just cut the finish, and then I can peel the finish back off. And that way I can glue it down real well to this whole area. A lot of your strength in your neck actually comes from the fretboard glued across this whole area, because that keeps that neck from pulling up. It's because it's pushing against this right here. And that's why these heavy braces are under here in the top. These braces that are in this part of the top are much heavier than everywhere else. And that's their purpose. So, now I'm going to clean this off. I'm not going to show you all of that, but basically I just take a scraper and just scrape all the finish off like that until I get down to bare wood. Well, I've got that area cleaned off. I set the fretboard back on here, and this is my last chance to test to see if the neck angle is right, and it looks really good. I'm getting about right at a 1/16 of an inch, 60 thousandths, which is 1.5 millimeters or 1.5 millimeter for those of you who prefer it to be in decimal form. So anyway, it's you know, you can't hardly beat perfect, so I guess I'll accept that. Okay, I'm back to where I was a minute ago. It only took me 5 minutes, if that, to clean this area off. It didn't take long at all. Some people would say I should have taped it off ahead of time, and I could have, but you know, it would probably take me just as long to tape it off as it does for me to scrape it off, because I am very good at that. I've done it a lot, and scraping is just kind of second nature. If you've learned how to do instrument work, you're going to need to learn how to do scraping. So it's pretty fast. Though taping it off would have saved a couple of minutes probably. I could have just rough taped it. By marking it the way I did and scraping it off, it's exactly right. You know, in other words, it's exactly where the fretboard is going to be aligned, which that's the way I like it. Okay, there, it dropped in that hole. I gotta get this end to drop in the hole. It looks like it just did. And now we've got them both in the locating holes there. I'm going to lift this back up, and I'll spread the glue around a little bit better. I don't worry quite as much about the spreading on this part, just because it's, you know, a removable part potentially down the road. But on the other hand, I want it to be a good connection because it does help with the strength of the neck. Probably gonna have to put a little more glue on there. I thought I had enough, but I don't think so. It's probably easier to spread it with the actual spreader in this case, because we're on a flat surface. So I'll use one of these spreaders. It actually does a little better job than the brush does when you're on a flat surface. Again, I try to get it just as thin a glue as I can get and get full coverage. I don't really like a lot of squeeze out on something like this. For some reason, I'm not getting as much glue spreading as I thought. It must be something to do with the atmosphere. This glue's drying pretty fast. Well, that's pretty good. I'll go ahead and put a little bit more on here too, because it just for some reason doesn't seem to be spreading and covering as well as it often does. Maybe it's this glue applicator. It puts down a pretty thin amount of glue, so maybe that's just I'm not used to that yet. I think we're pretty good there. I think we're fine. Get it in place for the final time here, clamp it up. There, it locked in. Right there, it's locked in place, so we can clamp her down now. My friends, it's been several days drying on this, and I just finished wet and dry sanding it. You can see probably the grain in there. It's got a lot of grain in this one for some reason, even more so than some of the others, I think. And the top is holding real well, so the top itself is pretty smooth. There's very few little tiny pits in it now. So I put, I don't know how many coats of lacquer on this and sanded them right back off. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this is, you know, in the past you've seen me have real problems with the blushing problem. Now, previously, and when I say previously, I'm talking a couple years back, I wasn't really having that problem. The last year or so I was trying different lacquer retarders and they just weren't cutting the mustard. One of them is a very popular one that you can get from an instrument supply company, and I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to give anybody a bad rap, but on the other hand, that retarder just did not work for me at all. I mean, I might as well not been using it at all. Here is the retarder you need to use, right here. Don't waste your money on the rest of the stuff. Get this. Right there. I'm telling you for sure, black and white for certain, this is the stuff. This stuff works. Spraying under the identical type conditions and perhaps even worse conditions, at least at one time, and this didn't blush at all. Just brought it right back into the air-conditioned shop instantly after I sprayed it. I have to spray outside, and some days it's just crazy humid here in Missouri. One day it was actually raining when I sprayed it. I just opened up the garage door, stood in the opening of the garage door and sprayed it, you know, and so it's basically 100% humidity out there and it still didn't blush. So, like I said, don't waste your money on the other stuff, just get this. I don't have any connection with these folks at all. But hopefully they'll see this video, and if you are connected with them, maybe you'll send them this video, and maybe they'll sponsor me. Hope you like that tip. Thank you. My friends, we're getting down to the wire on this old California airplane guitar. When I call it that, I just mean that the man that's getting this is a pilot. And as I mentioned way earlier on, that he flew in and gave me the deposit for this guitar. And it's really turning out special. Look at the sides on that, how they glow and change. I mean, it's really a nice guitar. The biggest problem is the finish. You can still see all the little pits from all of the grain. I have put a ton of lacquer on this thing. A lot of coats just on the back and sides that I didn't put on the top, and I think that's going to make the difference. I think I'll be able to sand it now and get about 90-95% of all those defects out of there, and the few that are left I will probably drop fill with a toothpick and try to fill them in, and then hopefully we can put our last final coats on this and call this thing a done deal. So it's going to take a ton of sanding right now. I'll just show you a little bit of that process and then we'll do the rest of it off camera. I've got some water here that I put a little dish soap in. I've soaked this sandpaper and it's really saturated now, and I'm using 320, which is a little bit coarse for this, but I've got to sand off a lot of finish. And so I'm using the 320 to help me get there a little faster, and yet it's still smooth enough that it leaves a pretty smooth finish. But this is going to take a while. And the next comment that most people make is, why am I not using a sanding block? Well, very little of any of this is perfectly flat, number one. Number two, I mean, like, so there's an arch to the back in both directions. And yes, a flat sanding block would still work in that regard because it's fairly level, fairly flat. It's a minimal arch. But the truth of the matter is, I just do better with my fingers. You know, if you stayed in one spot and made a mess, that would be a problem. As you can see, I move around and keep it an even amount of pressure everywhere I move. I can actually feel the holes with my fingers. And I know where they're at. And I go back over those areas. I can fan them out. I can't feel anything when I'm using a block. And the last thing is, when I'm using a block, the sandpaper builds up so much faster, even when I'm using a padded block. This way, this one piece will for sure last this whole back and possibly the whole guitar. You can see how white and almost soapy it looks. And that's the finish coming off. It's taking the finish off when it turns that white milky color like that. And I can see a lot of the spots have disappeared on this one spot. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and sand this a little bit more in just this 1/3 area here. We'll wipe it down and then we'll compare the unsanded areas to this to show you the difference. And I'm not even sure yet that this is gonna be the final time I have to sand it. I may have to sand it one more time yet. You just never know. This particular piece of Padauk seemed to even have bigger grain than some of the other I've used in the past. If I didn't get good results doing it this way, I would use a different method. I would use a block, but I get really good results this way and I don't have any problem whatsoever. And I've also had a lot of the fine car refinishers chime in, and they say when they get down to the detail, they use their fingers as well. I don't think that's finished, but let's wipe it down now and just compare what we've got. Maybe you can see the difference there. Hopefully you can. Between one and the other. There's the, unsanded sides there. Maybe you can get the light just right where you can see all the little defects. And then on this side, there's still a lot of defects, but there's a lot less. So, it still needs a lot. There's some areas like right in through here, no pores at all, but then there's pores in the other areas. So I'm just going to sand it really a lot and possibly even sand through in a place or two. And I don't really want to sand through, but it shouldn't be much of a problem because we're just using total clear. There's no coloring going on. So even if I sand through, it should come back and look fine. I'm going to do the rest of it off camera, but there's a lot more of that to be done. My friends, I've spent a long time sanding this with the wet or dry sandpaper using the water and the soap method. But when I got done, there were still lots of holes. I don't know if you can see them here or not, and if it's going to show up well enough on camera or not. But there's tons of holes in it. I then filled this middle section with a toothpick, and I used shellac. And I thought, well, shellac, the clear shellac, would probably fill these holes really fast, dry really fast. I took a long lunch, came back, sanded them off, started sanding. I thought, well, I can't use wet or dry now because shellac melts in water, so it won't work to use water. So I started using just 3M, this is 320 sandpaper, and I was just using this technique right here, and I'm just going to show you. This is the area that needs sanding the most right here on the guitar. So I was just doing this, leveling off those spots with the shellac. I don't know if you can see all of these rolls that roll up under this sandpaper, and in just a few seconds, it's just uncomfortable, it doesn't feel right, it gets under your fingers, it's just a mess. It just rolls up all these rolls in no time at all. So, but it also seems to knock the finish down much faster doing it dry than it does wet. And I'm getting rid of these holes. So I just went over and I switched to 220 with this type of sandpaper. This is this non-slip advanced abrasive this is 3M. You can get this from Lowe's also with their brand name. And it's the no buildup type sandpaper. You saw all those little rolls, and everything rolls up under your fingers with this. With this, look at the difference. It's completely different. It's a totally different experience. Do you see that? It's like powder. It just makes it like a powder, and the finish is coming off in a real hurry, and it's getting it down. It's leveling out those spots. You can look at that, it's just powder. Watch this. I wipe it down here on the carpet. It's clean, nothing on it at all. That's not the case here. This stays on here, it just builds up. This is awesome. Now, most people would tell you that this is not the kind of sandpaper to use on a finish. But I'm here to tell you that's another one of those myths that I've just debunked. This is what you want to use on your finish. Based on what I'm seeing, this is the way to go. It's 10 times faster, and it's leaving a smooth finish. Now, I've got this in 400 also, and what I'm going to do is use the 220 to knock it down like this and get rid of those holes, because I am really getting rid of the holes quickly. And then I'm going to go back over it with 400, and then I'm going to put on the final coat. And this is going to work like a dream compared to anything else I've ever tried. You know, ordinarily you just wouldn't use this kind of sandpaper for finish, but I'm here to tell you this is where it's at. Once you try this, you will thank me, you will bless me. My goodness, my good friends. Today's a fun day. After, I don't know, about a week or more that I've been on video with this guitar, maybe a little more than that, I'm not sure. I have been letting it dry for quite a while, and I've gotten it a long ways ahead of where we were. I still don't have it final buffed out and final polished, but you can see where we're at there. We've got the chrome Waverly tuning keys on there. I'm liking those a lot. I like the look even. It just looks nice. You can see there's the man's name and the inlay, and you can see I've got the 2 strings on it already, and I've got the bridge just laying there. And we're doing the intonation thing. People ask about this all the time. This is just a clothes hanger wire that I bent, put hooks on it. I put a spacer there to keep the strings apart. The only thing I would do a little different if I was making another one is I'd make spacing a little bit further apart, and I could fix that or make a new one, and I may just make a new one because I really like this rig. This is where you don't have to guess about intonation. You can set your intonation exactly right. And in the recent shop talk, I mentioned that I have come to the conclusion, and I came to this conclusion a long time ago, but I have absolutely come to the conclusion that after you put all the care and quality into your build on your instrument, the single most important thing, you know, you can talk strings, you can talk picks, you can talk all kinds of things, but in my opinion, the single most important thing after you build the instrument is intonation, period. Nothing else even matters or comes close, in my opinion. So that's why I spend a lot of time getting the intonation just perfect. And in fact, I don't get in any big hurry about that. I may take a day or two to actually decide that the intonation is perfect. You know, leave it strung up, let it stretch, let it feel itself out there, you know, and play it a little bit with just the 2 strings. And, you know, don't get in any big hurry. Just let's see if the intonation is perfect. And right now it's pretty close. So let's just show you what it sounds like right now with just the 2 strings. This is going to be a boomer. I can just tell you right up front. Okay, you know, keep in mind that this bridge is just floating here. It's still sitting on top of the finish even. I don't want to hit it crazy hard because these strings are just floating on top of this little temporary saddle that is floating on top of the temporary bridge. So everything is loose and just sitting there. The action on it is crazy low. I'm amazed how low I've got the action right now just with this temporary setup, and it doesn't have much of a buzz in it at all. A little bit of buzz in a place or two, but that should be expected since the frets haven't even been leveled yet. I'm just checking the tuning here. Right there. Really close on the intonation. That would be my G chord. Yeah, it's and I'm barely hitting it, and you can probably hear the tone coming out of it already. If I get on it like that a little bit, it's going to be a booming guitar when we get it all set up correctly and get the bridge glued on and all that. I am excited. This is going to be a killer guitar. Well, that's about all I can show you for right now, so I guess I'm going to let it set a little bit and relax. Then I'm going to mark where this saddle slot needs to be cut, because I don't even have a saddle slot in there yet. And I'll cut the saddle slot in this bridge, and then I'll do this whole thing again. Once I get the saddle installed in the bridge, then I'll put it back on here again, float it again, and then mark the outline of where I cut out the finish. One of the things I want to do before I, commit to this, and I'm almost committed right now, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm just about finished, but I just thought I'd show you this, is I put this little plastic protractor on here. You could use a square, or you could use a lot of different things, but I put the center line of the protractor right on the center line of the guitar, and then I square the bridge to that perfectly. I then put the saddle on here, get the saddle intonated perfectly on top of the bridge, just by eye, to leave space here and space between the string holes and the front of the bridge to just kind of decide that that's where I want that. And I'm about ready to go ahead and mark it and, go ahead and cut that slot. I'm going to do one last intonation test, and I'm pretty sure it's close enough. And keep in mind that the bridge is still floatable, of course, and I can still move the bridge even after I cut the slot, but the whole point is to try to make sure that the bridge ends up square to the top. Pretty good. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just commit to that spot there, and I'm going to mark it with the pencil, hold it in place. I'm going to mark the back side just in a straight line, and I'll just know that that's the back side of the saddle. And now I'll take the bridge out. I'll go ahead and loosen these strings a little bit. And now I can take the bridge out, just leave the string on there, and then hopefully you can see the little marks I've got right there. I want the saddle to be as long as I can, by the way, because a longer saddle helps spread out the sound. So I'm going to, make it come over almost to where this cuts down the hill. I'm not going to go ahead and make it go through like a lot of them and come down here. I'm just going to make it the full length of this upper area. Got an elaborate setup here. Got my slot routing jig that I made for routing the saddle slots. Typically I have this clamped to the top of the guitar, but in this case, because everything's still floating, I've got it all taped down to my table where this doesn't move much. You could probably really force it and move it, but if you're careful, it doesn't move. I've got this glued down to the table with just masking tape and some CA glue. This piece here can float, it doesn't matter. This is just to keep the back of the router level. I've already lined it up, and based on what I'm seeing here, it's lined up really well. I've got the depth set pretty deep. I'm think it'll cut it just fine though. So here we go. No time like the present. Well, I thought I was all the way over there. I thought I could see my mark, but I couldn't. So obviously I was wrong. We'll do it some more. That looks good. Let me get the vacuum out and clean up the mess. That first pass through there was 150 thousandths deep approximately. Yep. And this bridge is 371. So I'm going to figure up the math to go about 2/3 of the depth of the bridge, and I'll adjust the bit to be, you know, where I'm at least 2/3 of the way down through the bridge. That's what I'd like for it to be. And I'll come back and show you what that looks like here in a minute. By my math, I needed to be about another 100 thousandths deeper than I was. I cut 150 thousandths on the first pass, so I'm going to cut another 100 thousandths now. And just have to be very careful doing it. But here we go. Yep, that dropped us down about another 100 thousandths, so we've still got a little over 150 thousandths of wood below that, which is plenty, but this is just going to be fine. Let me take it apart here now. Hopefully you can see the slot that we've got cut in there, and looks to be in pretty good shape, so we'll go on to the next step. Off camera, my friends, I have spent a lot of time making this thing as perfect as I can make it. I believe I've got it as close as I'll ever get it. So it's time to mark this. I'm going to hold it in place. I've sharpened up the tip of this thing here as sharp as I can get it. And I lightly score, keeping the blade turned slightly toward the bridge so that it doesn't somehow wander off out into the middle. Just lightly scoring it. This is why the factories don't do it this way. It's just way too time consuming. I don't blame them for not doing it, but I'll tell you what, the most important thing is intonation. So, you know, if you don't get that right, you really don't have anything right. Well, I believe I've got it marked as well as it can be marked. So I guess I'll take it off of there. Yes, it looks like it's marked well. Now it's the fun job of getting all of that finish off of there. Here we go. Now that we've got it all marked, I've sharpened up my little homemade chisel here. That's just a finger plane blade in there. Very, very sharp. And a chunk of metal that I, just had laying around. Knurl on there is just accidental. It's just because it was already on there. So the important thing is I put an angle to this slot where I slide the blade in, and then I just tighten it down with that. And that angle and the undercut here allows me to get very low down to the finish. And then I just start scraping the finish off. That's about the only thing I know to do. You could do this with just a plain old chisel. You could do it. The problem with the plain chisel is that it digs in on the corners a lot, where this is a rounded bottom and you can really control it very well. I'll just fast forward through this part and let you see what we're doing. Rather than eat up a lot more storage space, you can see I've just got a little spot there cleaned off. I'll just go ahead and clean the rest of it off camera, and I'll show you what it looks like just before I put the bridge on. My friends, I've got it all cleaned off, And you can probably see there how it's all down to bare wood. So it's time to do the thing and put the glue on it. And as we say that, I just see a little tiny shiny spot glimmering here. And anytime you see a shiny spot, then that means there's still a little finish on there. So there's just a little flake right here in the front. Double checking it. Yeah, you can get real picky with this. I see another little spot here. Depends on the light you get it in. Okay, that's got to be good enough. I thought I'd tooth that up a little bit, and then after I toothed it, I took the acetone to it. And as you can see, very little came off on that, as opposed to the Padauk. The Padauk just turns, colors whenever you do that because there's so much oil in the Padauk. But there's not much in this. Seems to be working just fine. Spread this glue around a little bit. And as I've said so many times, this is not the place to get in a hurry. Make sure you get 100% coverage on this. You don't need a lot of glue, you just need full coverage. In fact, less glue is more, as long as it's full coverage. I'm working it down into the little cracks and crevices because as you scrape that finish off, you make a few little cracks and crevices. It's just the nature of the beast. Alright, I'm convinced that's good coverage on the top of the guitar. Now we'll do the same thing here. We'll spread it out as thin as we can spread it out, but yet get it good coverage. I might add that the back edge of your bridge is the most important piece too. It's the part that always lifts first, so you want to make sure that is the best glued area. Okay. It takes a little while for it to get seated down in that finished area, but it will seat down in there if you keep wiggling it around. I believe I've just about got it. I'll clean off that excess squeeze out there. I believe it's seated in there perfectly, so I'll get the clamps now. I've got a caul on the inside there I'm holding up there with my hand. Now if I can get this in here and get it around where it'll hold that caul up there, and hopefully this clamp will be wide enough to go around all of that. With the caul and this taller bridge that I've got on this, it's just a pretty tight fit, but I think it'll work. That looks good. Let me double check it with the mirror on the inside to see if we got the caul in the right place, just to make sure it's not doing something goofy. Well, it slid back a little more than I would have liked. Let's see if I can get it back. I don't know if I can or not. It's just not a lot of room in there. There it is. Pretty darn good there. Now there's a lot of glue squeeze out all over. And I'll set these wings down to hold the end of the bridge down. And then I don't even think that's enough. I always put extra clamps on it, even though it's designed for a single clamp. There you go. That's about as good as it gets. You can see pretty much even squeeze out all the way around the back. Not quite too much on these wings back here, but I think even they're clamped down real good. Pretty good squeeze out along the front edge too, so it's all pretty even. Now we'll just do some cleanup. We'll show you what it looks like tomorrow. My friends, it's the next morning. I have worked on the bridge now that it's glued in place. I've reamed out these holes, got them fitting the pins just right. I didn't show any of that. I've shown it before. I just take a long reamer and run down through there and taper the holes. All the pins fall into place now, no problem. The one thing I don't care for on these pins is they don't have a string groove in these pins. I'm sure that we're going to end up doing something. We'll either have to make the groove in the bridge or in the pins, and I might just put the groove in the pins because I prefer it to be there, but we'll see how that goes as we get further along. I've also lightly leveled and recrowned and polished the frets. The frets are in pretty good shape. I've also cleaned up the fretboard. But now I'm going to try a new product. We've tried it on one other instrument so far and it seemed to be fine. It's called Be Good Wood Oil. It's got beeswax in it and food grade type oils and things. I thought I'd just go ahead and try it on here and see what I think of it. I can tell there's a wax in it already. I can instantly see the wax in it, which is the beeswax, of course. And it might be a very good thing for sealing fretboards. It seems slicker instantly to me than the linseed oil does. It seems to penetrate about the same. As far as penetration goes, don't see much difference there. But what I'm seeing so far, I kind of like. It's got a pleasant smell. You know, the one difference would be boiled linseed oil has always been my go-to, and I think it's pretty safe, but I also know they do add chemicals to boiled linseed oil, and you know, it's not the kind of linseed oil that you can eat, of course. Where this stuff here apparently is food grade, so shouldn't be very toxic, at least, if you can believe the label. I do kind of like what I'm seeing so far. Be early to say that I'm going to switch to this, but right at the moment it looks pretty good. I'm going to wipe it back off. I'm turning the rag over and over to get dry places here and clean it up. It gives it a mild sheen. And it wipes off of the finish where you get it on the finish without leaving any trace. So that's what that looks like. I don't know if the light is where you want it to be or not, but you know, I'm pretty happy with that. They don't give this stuff away. It was relatively expensive by the time you get it shipped in and everything. But on the other hand, it probably lasts a very long time for using it in this way. Well, that takes me one step closer, so I'm going to start making string grooves and all that for the rest of the strings. I'm not actually going to film that because I've got it in lots of other videos, but I'll bring you back at the moment when I start tuning it up, and then that way you'll get to hear it tuned up and hear what it sounds like. I've decided that I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm going to go ahead and put this same coating on the bridge as well. Do that before I start putting the strings on. Again, it's real obvious to me there's a lot of beeswax in this product. As soon as I put it on the wood, I can see the wax. In fact, I think I'm pretty sure that I would have realized the beeswax was in there had I not even known it, because the instant you put it on, you can see the wax if you know what you're looking for. That looks pretty good. Now we'll move on to the strings. So what I decided to do was go ahead and cut the grooves into the pegs. As you can see, I did that with the Dremel tool, and this one hasn't been cut yet. So I'm going to have to do that 5 more times, but that makes them fit much better. Just to give you an idea, without the groove in there, and I'll try to zoom this in a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. Without the groove in there, the peg barely goes down in there. I mean, it just barely goes down in there at all, you can see. And so you'd either have to make the hole much bigger, you'd have to cut a big groove in this, or something. It's just not going to work. But with the groove in there, it changes everything. It goes right in, no problem. And I'm hoping I've got it loose enough where you can pull it back out. And there you go. Now on the bottom end, there's a bevel to, just like I do on all pegs, to keep it from catching on the very bottom there. Anyway, that should be the way they all fit. Like I said, the pegs go down in there, no problem. But without that groove on there, they won't go in there with the string in there. So anyway, we're gonna do all that to all these pegs. I thought I might also try to head off a comment or two. The reason I choose to file that groove into these quote-unquote high-dollar pins is because even though these pins are, you know, again, quote-unquote high-dollar, these are way cheaper than this very expensive guitar. And basically what you're doing is you have to put a flaw in one of the two. You either have to file a flaw into your guitar, which is worth many thousands of dollars, or you can file a flaw into a pin that's worth maybe several dollars. So I'll choose to file the flaw into the pin over the flaw into the guitar. And this will keep the guitar stronger for years to come. And if the pin fails, you can replace the pin cheaply. So that's my logic for it. Somebody else might have a different reason or a different logic. I did round over the corners in the tops of the holes that you might be able to see. The top right here is rounded over, and the reason I do that, again, is to avoid a flaw down the road where the string is cutting into it. If you round that over, the string then has a graceful way to transition that curve, and less likely to break too. But anyway, that's my thinking. Again, I just boil everything down to just simple common sense logic. Well, my friends, it's that moment when a new baby is born, or maybe it's closer to when that little baby takes its first steps or says its first words. We're about to tune it up. I've got all the action and everything adjusted, but I have not tuned it to pitch yet. This is the very first time. One more time through it and we should be close enough for the first chord. Here's the first chord. Sounds like a guitar. Wow. Yeah, this thing's awesome. It's just sweet. It's really got a nice sound. Plays easy. I know it sounds crazy to even say this, but kind of hope the customer doesn't want it. Because I'll just be happy to keep it. Yeah, this thing's going to be sweet. You give it a week for the finish to dry. That's about how long the finish has been drying, only a week. you'll smell the finish for the next 2 or 3 months when you open the case. I mean, it takes that long for the finish to cure. For it to already sound this good, it already, you know, blows away half the guitars you'll find in a music store. Maybe all of them. Wow. Yeah, I don't know how you could help but like that. Well, my friends, I'm in love with this old guitar here. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lordy, since my baby said goodbye. I don't know what I'm gonna do, all I do is sit and sigh, oh Lord. The last long day she said goodbye, oh Lordy, I thought I would die. She do me, she do you, she got the kind of loving, Lord, I love to hear her when she called me sweet daddy, such a beautiful dream. I hate to think it's all over, lost my heart it seems. I've grown so used to you and now, well I'm nobody's sugar daddy now. I'm lonesome, got the lovesick blues. Yeah, I'm lonesome, got the lovesick blues. Oh, I like it a lot. I wish I could play guitar better. I've been playing this guitar for a little while today, and I tested all the intonation, and boy, I mean, it was really spot on, with the exception of the B, which is very common, and the B was just a little bit sharp. Not real sharp, but just a little bit. So I'm going to file the B back just a little bit, which is very common. See if I can do it in place. I may have to take it apart, and I will be taking it apart down the road anyway to do the final buffing and polishing and all that. But pretty sure I can do a lot of it right here in place. Yeah, it's going to get in the way too much. I'll have to take it off to do a better job, but I'm not going to do that right now, but that'll kind of remind me to do that by having that little bit of a notch in there. And that might even be enough, but I don't think it is. It'd probably need a little bit more than that. Thought I'd try to show you the intonation on this guitar. It is pretty darn good. There's your open 6th string, pretty darn close. There's your open 5th string, right on the money. Open 4th string, pretty much right on the money. Open 3rd string, pretty much right on the money. Now the B has been a little bit sharp, but even that's not very far off. Pretty darn close all the way around. So I'm really happy with that. That really makes the chords ring out clear whenever you get the intonation right. As I said earlier, that's the most important thing about a guitar, in my opinion, well, on any stringed musical instrument, is getting the intonation correct. I really am liking this guitar a lot. This is probably the first instrument I've built where I just can't sit it down. I mean, they're all have been very, very good, but this one's really hard to beat. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lordy, since my baby said goodbye. I don't know what I'm gonna do, all I do is sit and sigh, oh Lord, the last long day she said goodbye. Oh Lordy, I thought I would die. She do me, she do you, she got the kind of love, Lord, I love to hear her when she called me sweet daddy, such a beautiful dream. And I hate to think it's all over, lost my heart it seems. I've grown so used to you, and now, well, I'm nobody's sugar daddy now. I'm lonesome, got the lovesick blues, and I'm in love with the beautiful gal. That's what's the matter with me. I'm in love with the beautiful gal, but she don't care about me. I tried and I tried to keep her satisfied, but she just wouldn't stay. And now that she is leaving, this is all I can say. I got a feeling called the blues, Lord, since my baby said goodbye. I don't know what I'm gonna do. All I do is sit and sigh. Oh Lord, the last long day she said goodbye. Well, Lordy, I thought I would die. She do me, she do you. She got the kind of loving, Lord, I love to hear her when she called me sweet daddy. Such a beautiful dream. I hate to think it's all over. I lost my heart, it seems. I've grown so used to you, and now, well, I'm nobody's sugar daddy now. I'm lonesome, got the lovesick blues. Yeah, I'm lonesome, got the lovesick blues. Well, with the exception of that little missed yodel note on the end, I think I did that okay. There's always got to be something. I ain't going to do it again. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Well, it's time to put on the pièce de résistance, which is the pickguard in this case. I've got the backing taken off of this already. So now I just want to be very, very, very careful that I lay it in the exact position I want it in before I let it get stuck. That looks pretty good to me. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and stick her down. And that makes it official. Now, I still haven't done the final polishing on this, and maybe I'm premature putting this on there, but I kind of wanted it to be on there just so that when I do the final polishing, I can polish this out with the rest of it. And, you know, anyway, it's done. Whether it's the right thing to do or not, I did it. So let's take a look at it now like that. Yeah. That really adds to it, I think. It's just a nice looking guitar. Don Bishop, in my opinion, you're a lucky man. I wish I was keeping this one. I love the little diamond patterns going down the fretboard as well. I just think it all looks real nice together. You know, at first, I'll be perfectly truthful, I wasn't completely crazy about that rosette, but now that everything's tied together, I kind of felt like it would tie it all together once we got everything put on there and done. So I'm real happy with that too. In person, everything just looks like it should be there. I mean, you know, that's the best way I can explain it. It just all looks like it should be there. So I'm pretty darn happy with that. My friends, this guitar's been sitting for several days now with the strings on it, so I did a little bit of tweaking here, you know, a little bit of final adjustments as far as the action goes, because I've got it pretty good already, but I fine-tuned it a little bit more. The reason I even turned the camera back on was I wanted to share with you something else that you could kind of take a look at on your own instrument, and you will understand whether or not you have it set up correctly. Watch the tuner on this. Now, these are just open notes. Look how steady the tuner is. See, it doesn't even move. It doesn't even move. It just goes right there and stays there. Look at that. Doesn't even move until I talk. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't see that every day. That just makes me even that much more proud of this guitar. Seriously, because you don't get any overtones that way. You don't get any of those dissonant notes. When you hit a chord, it's a chord, you know, and it sounds like it's supposed to sound. And this guitar is, it's on the money. I let my brother play it just a few seconds over the weekend. We had to attend a funeral, unfortunately, for my father-in-law. But I took it with me to show my brother because I knew he'd be there, and you've heard him play before, and he's a very picky musician, let me tell you. And he said, wow, he said, this is your best one ever for sure. Just get one sound out of it, and that's pretty cool. My friends, it's time to disassemble this guitar one last time, do a final sanding, buffing, polishing, whatever it takes, even possibly putting more lacquer on it in places, and try to make it look just as nice as we can. The band played it last night, and I think that was a total success. We had a great time picking on it, and you should be able to see all those videos. And I'll get started taking this thing apart again and hopefully sanding it for the last time. Well, my friends, a couple of hours later, and I've sanded the top, I've sanded the sides, now I'm sanding the back. Again, I'm using this 400, and I know a lot of people are cringing thinking that 400 is too coarse, but when you've got to sand a lot, this 400 is just perfect. And like I said, I'm trying to get this down and still trying to get the pores evened out in this, and you know, it just is what it is. It's knocking out a bunch of them this time. I think I'm actually going to have to spray the guitar again. I was hoping I wouldn't have to, but I think realistically I probably will have to, although it may surprise me yet. I don't think I've sanded through the finish anywhere yet, so as long as I haven't sanded through it, you know, I may not have to put another coat on there. My biggest problem is the carpal tunnel. I'm having real trouble holding onto this. And yes, I know already you're screaming at the camera, use some sanding block or use this or use that. Well, I don't need a sanding block. I sand it 10 times faster with my fingers. I have been using the sanding blocks and doing different things, and they just don't cut it. This works so much better. People say, well, you're going to get grooves and unevenness. Well, no, you will get grooves and unevenness. I get it perfectly smooth. I have no problem with it at all. Nobody would be able to look at this and say, he sanded that by hand and you can see this finger grooves. I guarantee you it'll look glass smooth when I'm done. Period. So anyway, my point is, that this is difficult sanding, and the carpal tunnel is not making it any easier. In fact, I've had to stop and scream 2 or 3 times already. And then it goes fine for a little while, and then all of a sudden it gets in that one spot, and then I just have to drop the sandpaper and cry and whimper for a little while, and then I go back to it. So that's just the way it is. But I am getting it there, and I'm really hoping this will be the final sanding. But it's really looking like I may have to coat it again. And then, of course, that will mean I'll have to probably sand it again. This 400 sandpaper sands really smooth. You know, honestly, for 400, you really can't see the sanding marks in it. It's really smooth when you get done with it. But You know, if I was going to call this my final, I would still sand it probably with the wet or dry and go down to about 1200 before I buff it out. But at the moment, I'm not that far along, so I'm just taking it one step at a time and hoping that this sanding could possibly be the final one, but I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope that that's the case. Once again, my friends, for you it's been mere seconds, but for me it has been weeks. Had set the guitar aside for a while, and the customer is also, planning to come pick it up over a period of time. And so while it was sitting around here, I worked on it a little bit more and tweaking this, tweaking that. And somewhere along the line, I thought I ought to play it for you at least. I know I already played it a little bit in this video, but it's now what I would consider completely finished. So I thought I'd get it out and play it again and put a proper ending to this video before you see the band playing it. And the band is going to play it in another video separately. This is the case I got for it. It is a Martin case. I think there are 7 latches on this case. It's a really nicely made case. I guess due to the pandemic, I couldn't get the Hiscox cases that I wanted. That's what I've been using over the last several instruments. Anyway, this is not a downgrade. In fact, I paid more money for this case. It's a really, really nice, high quality case. And in fact, I don't know if it'll show up here, but you can perhaps see the interior. It's a very, very, very nice case. The only negative about the case is that it is branded as a CF Martin case, but I couldn't do anything about that. I had to get a case for it, and in the pandemic, you got to do what you got to do. Here's a final look at it all finished up. I took the finish off of the pickguard. I was happier with it that way, and I oiled it up, and you can see the peg head there, and trying to get the glare of the light out of the peg head a little bit so you can see it a little better. And might as well look at the fretboard one more time. And the pickguard and the bridge. And there's the tail end of it. You can still see a few little minor imperfections in that finish where the finish has just sucked into the pores. And I've tried and tried and sanded and sanded and tried and sanded and sanded and tried. And that's as good as I can get it. And there's the back of the neck and the back of the peg head. So now let's listen to it a little bit. Just for the record, the customer is going to be coming in, I believe flying in. He is a private pilot. And we're going to try to meet him at the airport and get a shot of his plane coming in. And if we get all of that, we'll either include it in this video, which I kind of doubt, but we will include it somewhere, and we'll probably make an addendum or something like that, or maybe I'll include it in a shop talk down the road. But hopefully you'll get to see the customer, pick it up, see what he thinks of the guitar, and hopefully we'll get a picture of his plane and that sort of thing. Just as clear, just as clean. You couldn't really find one any clearer, especially on the tuner. It just is absolutely perfect on the tuner. And it's just got a real nice sustain. It just tapers off nice and slow. You know, it's got a really long sustain. Let's see if I can think of something that we could do one little song here on. We'll just do a little bluegrass tune. This one's called Unfaithful One. Unfaithful one, you'll have to suffer. You're doomed to go through life alone, for no one else will ever trust you. They'll know your heart is made of stone. I still recall those happy years, dear. Our love was fresh as flowers of spring, but now you left me for a stranger. You lost the right to wear my ring. Unfaithful one, you'll have to suffer. You're doomed to go through life alone, for no one else will ever trust you. They'll know your heart is made of stone. Yes, they'll know your heart is made of stone. Oh, I like this guitar. You know, I would hate to lose a sale, but on the other hand, I wouldn't cry one lousy drop of tears if he said I don't want it. I would just love to keep this one. I don't have a nice one like this to have in my family yet. I suppose the right thing to do would be to offer it to the next person in line, but I wouldn't do that. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all take care.